Have you ever taken a late-night bus? Felt that strange, heavy silence as the city lights blur past the window? What if I told you that sometimes you're not as alone as you think? Across the globe, night bus drivers from different countries, people who have never met, all tell the same chilling story. It's about a man who appears silently in the back seat. He never pays a fare. He never says a word. And every single time he shows up, someone on that bus disappears forever. This is the story of File 15. The Silent Passenger. The first official report takes us back to 1999, on a long, desolate route through northern Finland. The driver, a veteran of the night shift, was glancing at his cabin monitor when he noticed something off. A man, cloaked in a dark coat with his head bowed, was sitting in the very last row. But this was impossible. The last stop was miles back, and no one had boarded. Confused, maybe a little unnerved, the driver pulled over at the next designated stop and walked back to check. The seat was empty. The man was gone. The only proof he was ever there was a single, solitary wet footprint on the floor mat, slowly evaporating into the cold night air. The driver dismissed it as a trick of the light, a flicker on the old monitor. He was wrong. Over the next 2 decades, the sightings began to form a terrifying pattern. Poland, Canada, Argentina, Japan. Turkey, the locations were random, but the figure was always the same. Tall, motionless, his face perpetually obscured by shadows or the angle of his head. He never turned, never interacted. He was just there. Passengers who sat near the back of these buses reported a bizarre and consistent phenomenon. A sudden, inexplicable drop in temperature. It wasn't just a draft from a window. It was a deep, penetrating cold, as if all the warmth had been sucked out of the cabin in an instant. One witness, a university student traveling home in Canada, later described the feeling in an online forum. She wrote, "It felt like someone else was breathing for me, like my own lungs were just along for the ride. The air grew heavy, thick, and the simple act of taking a breath became a conscious effort. Then, just as suddenly as it began, the feeling would vanish, and so would the man in the back seat." The mystery of the silent passenger took an even more disturbing turn in 2014. A bus driver in rural Ontario, having heard whispers of these stories from other drivers online, decided he would be prepared. He rigged a high-sensitivity audio recorder near his cabin, hoping to catch something, anything, that could explain the phenomenon. For weeks, nothing happened. Then, on a cold October night, at exactly 2:13 a.m., his bus's rear door suddenly swung open. This was mechanically impossible. The bus was traveling at over 50 miles per hour on an empty stretch of highway. The driver's heart pounded, but he saw nothing in his mirrors. A few seconds later, his recorder picked up a sound. It was a soft, rhythmic scratching, the kind of sound fingernails might make dragging across the coarse fabric of a bus seat. The sound moved. It started from the back, seat by seat, getting progressively closer to the front. The driver gripped his wheel, his knuckles white, sweat beading on his forehead. The scratching noise stopped right at his shoulder. In his peripheral vision, he saw nothing, but when he dared to glance at the passenger seat right next to him, he saw it. 2 distinct impressions, sinking into the cushion, as if an invisible person had just sat down beside him. He drove the rest of his route in absolute, gut-wrenching terror. When investigators and paranormal researchers began connecting these sightings, they uncovered a horrifying correlation. Every single route that had a credible, silent passenger sighting also had an unsolved missing person case from that very same night. The connection was undeniable. Some of these people vanished during scheduled stops, seemingly stepping off the bus for a moment and never returning. Others were last seen by fellow passengers sleeping soundly in their seats, only to be gone by the next stop, with all their belongings left behind. One of the most tragic and baffling cases involved a young woman in Japan. Clear CCTV footage showed her boarding the late-night bus in Kyoto. She scans her pass, finds a seat, and pulls out a book. The bus cameras track her for the next 2 hours, but at the final destination, she wasn't there. Footage from the depot showed every other passenger disembarking, but she is never seen leaving the bus. When security came aboard to do a final check, they found her seat empty. Her book was lying on the floor, and her seatbelt was still fastened, clicked securely into place as if she had evaporated right out of it. Where did she go? Where did any of them go? Theories abound, each more unsettling than the last. Some experts in paranormal phenomena suggest the silent passenger is a residual entity, a kind of psychic echo trapped between states of being. They argue that it can only manifest in places where human consciousness is at its lowest ebb, like a nearly empty bus in the dead of night, filled with tired, half-asleep minds. The bus itself acts as a kind of conduit for its appearance. Another, more skeptical theory is mass hallucination, or a modern urban legend spreading through the tight-knit community of long-haul drivers. But this seems unlikely. The reports are too specific, too identical, coming from people on different continents who had no contact with one another. The Ditosa dark coat, the lowered head, the sudden cold are too consistent to be a coincidence. But a third theory, one that circulates in the darker corners of the internet, is perhaps the most frightening. It proposes that the silent passenger isn't haunting these buses at all. He is using them. That this entity is a traveler, moving from place to place, city to city, country to country. But he isn't crossing the borders that we understand. He's using our world as a transit system to travel across his own. And the missing passengers are the fare he pays to an unknown toll collector on the other side. They are not the target. They are the price of his ticket. This theory paints the entity not as a ghost, but as something far more ancient and purposeful. The most recent and definitive evidence we have came from a European night bus in 2022. The bus was equipped with a state-of-the-art security system, including pressure sensors on the seats and multiple high-fidelity microphones. At exactly 3:01 a.m., deep in the countryside with no stops for miles, the system logged an alert. The pressure sensor on the rearmost seat activated, registering the weight of an average adult male. No one had boarded. Then, the footage showed something impossible. The rotating handle on a seat to Rosa's head turned slowly, as if an unseen hand was adjusting it for comfort. The driver saw none of this. He was focused on the road, but the cabin microphone picked up a whisper. It was faint, raspy, and close to the driver. It said 2 words. "Next stop." The driver, startled, checked his GPS. He was on a highway. There was no stop for another 30 miles. Confused, he said nothing. A moment later, the whisper came again, this time clearer, colder, and seemingly right in his ear. "For you." When the bus finally rolled into its destination hours later, it was completely empty. The engine was still running. The doors were open. But the driver was gone. Police searched the entire bus. They found no signs of a struggle, no blood, no evidence of foul play. The driver's wallet and phone were still in his jacket, which was neatly folded on his seat. The only thing out of place was his set of keys. They weren't in the ignition. They were resting on the rearmost seat, placed perfectly in the center of the cushion, right where the pressure sensor had first detected the silent passenger. It was the last confirmed sighting to date. So if you ever find yourself on a bus late at night and feel a sudden, unexplainable chill run down your spine, maybe check the reflection in the window. You might not be alone. And you might want to ask yourself if this is your final stop. Thanks for watching. If you have any stories about strange encounters on late-night transit, share them in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the unknown. Stay safe out there.